Welcome back, everybody, to, is this episode 4 or 3?
4, facciamo 4.
4. Okay, this is
Quattro.
episode 4. Okay, everybody, I just want you to understand something, what this is about. This is about children that were orphans. And I think that when we realise that in that era, the rich were very rich. Is that not so, Dr. Lucy?
Yeah.
And the poor were very, very, very poor. There was no Centrelink, there was no welfare, there was nothing. And this was the Bourbon Era, where a lot of people, and there was a lot of poverty, and there was a lot of richness. But if you were born and you were one of the foundlings, what it was is that you had a stigma. You were given a name, the names that Dr. Lucy said. So we'll just say in English like a Smith or a Jones. And you were identified, and that was you for the rest of your life. You went through as a Smith and a Jones, and you were labelled, stamped as an orphan, as a bastard, and you could not go further. No one would come with you or partner with you or do business with you, because you were, that's what you were, you know, you were just, your only way out was like a lot of people did. They migrated out. A lot of them came to Australia. A lot of them went to America. A lot of them went away. Some stayed and made new lives. But the ones that were stayed in the towns, can you imagine being in a town? I'm just thinking about a town like Rosebud, a small little town like we are in Rosebud, and everyone knowing you and saying, no, don't go there, because they're a bastard, they're illegitimate. You know, your whole entire life was patterned, and you could not go further. Only by the grace of God, through people who helped you if they had that heartfelt help. And these are these children. Dr. Lucy spent countless hours, years researching and finding this information for us today to utilise, to share with you about their experiences. So in other words, we all feel, Lina especially because her grandfather was one of them, we all feel like we're their voice. We all feel, us three, we feel like they're spiritual mothers, you know. I felt like if I could have gotten them all and taken them in and looked after those children, you know, I would have. So bear with us, come into this with us, understand what this is all about.
I think the other thing before we talk to Lucia is that we need to understand the social structures at that time.
Yeah.
And the different economic status of people that reside during that area. You had nobility. There was no middle class. It was either poor or money. You either owned land or you worked on land or you were inherited land. And there was no, dummy. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. A few little beans would grow into to some semindela che tipo un po' di verdura, un po' di, broad beans, I fave. That's the different social structures that were in place. And people, the other thing also is there was no welfare system. And the foundlings in Sicily, we created a welfare system where there was nobility, there was the mayor, and then there was somebody else, I've forgotten who the third person was. And we created that social structure in terms of the health services to assist that, because there was, not just one or two, there were thousands and thousands of children. And I think the differences between the social structures and the difference between the poor and the people of nobility is that the people of nobility were able to, can I say the word fool? Can I say fool? Or take thinking that it was their time to earn or take a woman, can I say that?
Yeah.
And get her pregnant.
Yeah.
There was no system where you were able to abort the child. You were taken away, like those old movies, and probably perhaps gone into the country, given birth, and then gave that child up. But there was also, as you said, that social stigma attached to that. It's like, I'm about to give birth. Will I be able to, who's going to look after me? Who's looking to look after my child? And the emotional and mental health of that person, or that woman, that young woman, is astronomical. It's far beyond my words, or far beyond my world.
Can't even comprehend it.
No. Can't comprehend it.
No.
But then again, you've got the other side of it, where you've got a husband and wife, or a male and a female, that are in relationships that do accidentally fall pregnant, but there's not enough food, and they can't survive or support this child through even milk, even providing nurturing milk, because you can't go down to the local shops and buy milk. You need to produce it. And if you've got other health complications, your mammary glands are not working. You and I know, we've all, our mammary glands aren't working. We can't produce that milk. So you're going to have this child that's not well. You need to help that child. So what do you and your man or your partner do, or your family do? You go and give that child up. Now, you give that child up not because you don't want the child, and there will be people that will fall into that category. You give that child up because you're not able to provide this child with the future. And the future outlook for that child is perhaps another home. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, it is. And that's where the lyric comes from, bread is gold. Yep. Where, I don't know about you, but my nonna, she never threw bread out. She always kissed the bread and put it away and used it for something.
Yeah. No,
I think like it's a story. Yeah.
Like you both said, there was this kind of stigma that was kind of for life. And on the other hand, anyone who was abandoned, any child, I think it was a gesture of love. It was to give the opportunity to have a better life because of the poverty which was spread amongst everyone, so thousands of these children abandoned, then they were lucky if they survived. But even the ones with parents were lucky if they survived, There were so many children born, and the poverty was so high that even in legitimate families, it was even a gift to stay alive and become an adult.
I'll give you an example. My nonna, my maternal nonna, Angelina Mazzola, she had 14 children. 14 children, 3 survived, which is my aunties. They all came to Australia. And my uncle, which I never met, my mother never met, but yet when I'm out in the Italian community, I met some people that knew my uncle, because my uncle died at 8. I think he was 6 or 8 years old. And there's a photo of him passed away in a chair. And when you meet somebody in the community that says, I know the story of your uncle, and it's like, how do you know my uncle? Not even my mother knows my uncle. But these are stories when you've got 14 children, 3 survive, and then 1 dies because of some other disease.
There were no money to pay for the, medicines.
Yeah. And in those days, the women and the men didn't live a long life.
No.
What was their age span? 50s? That was it?
My nonna died at 63, so that's probably the average at that age, I'd say.
Yeah, I remember
that's later on, 63.
I remember my nonna when she came to Australia, and this was just after World War II. She was in her mid-50s, and she looked like an 80-year-old.
Yeah,
and she'd had multiple miscarriages, a lot of stuff what she went through. She was born in the same age as 1899. She was born at that era where she went through the wars and the famine and the Great Depression, the fascists, the whole lot of stuff. And then to come to a country. Yeah, and to come to a country.
That's a lot on a body.
Yeah.
Mentally and physically, that's a lot on a body. No wonder.
And to come to a country where it was open and it welcomed the migrants, and they all worked and they all lived in a house together, and they all prospered and they all made money and they all celebrated all the time. That was the era that I grew up in. I mean, I grew up in richness, in wealth. Yeah. And there's this woman, how can she relate to us? she couldn't even understand how we grew up. She always used to say to me, "Figlia mia, sono benedetta, benedetta." I didn't know what she was going through, what she went through.
But you got the opposite side of that, where you've got my nonna was a very simple nonna, very simple lady, I was being told. And my nonno, and I'll talk about their life together later on.
Yes, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, but they lived through different eras and different situations based on where they were and their upbringing, and also the statuses. But we'll go on to the PowerPoint because I want to talk about that.
Just to relate to the symbolism of love,
yes,
that these women or these people who left their children, for sure they left to give this child a different life and the way to survive. Yes. And the signal of this is related to what I'm going to show you. So these children were abandoned with signals. There was I'm sharing, sorry a moment.
No.
There were symbols like left with the children in order to be able one day, when they were able to come back and get the children back, to have the proof of recognition. So there was a kind of language of abandonment. That can be half of a medal, half of a playing card, and then half was left with the child, the other half was kept by the parent to abandon, in order to be able, when they were able to come back and have this proof of identity, that the parent was the one for that child.
Yeah.
Because all these symbols were recorded. So, for example, as you can see here, could be jewelry when there were children related to relationship between a noble woman or man and servant. There were anyway even children left with jewelry or holy images cut in half, playing cards. What I could find for Messina, I think I showed you last time. Well, for example, these little pockets and the image, a message, an holy image.
Yes.
Then, for example, other signals that I could find in the records were, for example, the proof that this baby was Christian, to avoid that the baby was again baptized. For example, even the presence of the salt with the kid symbolized that that baby was baptized. For example, here it's weird that I could find that this piece of paper written in English, and this was left with a child in Messina. And it's in English.
In English?
Related to a boat, something, for example, it says, our charge for discharging call. So, for example, I think this was related to someone who came by boat to Messina. And, for example, this is funny in a way, because this girl, Carolina, was the name given by the parent, was found with un nastro giallo e verde al collo. So she had a string which was yellow and green around her neck, and then nastro giallo al polso sinistro, and nastro verde al polso destro, and she was found on the 4th of July, 1882.
Oh my God.
So this was like the paper written with the girl, and this girl actually was found full of these ribbons in her body, and she was.
May I ask a question, Lucy?
Yeah.
With those signs and with that stuff, were they conservate and put away, or were they kept with that person?
Okay, so in this case, this little paper ticket left with the girl was the evidence from the parent, okay? Then everything was recorded in the recording books.
Yeah.
As you can see here, for example, this is what the people recorded about the children in the Periphery of Messina. They were given a number, like a reference number, on the day, for example, on the 5th of July, 1882, then the time when the child was found, 11 a.m., from the ruota, the wheel. Then they recorded the clothes and also the distinctivity, the signals found with the baby. As you can see here, La Ruotara, the direttrice also in this case of the Brefotrofio, wrote down that this girl was full of ribbons, strings of different colors around her body. So that was the signals. So one day, if this girl was alive anyway, and the parent could come back, for sure would have said, on this day, I left this girl full of ribbons. So then looking, they could find the evidence that matched with the declaration of the parent in order to be able to give back the child to the parent. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, in this case, this girl was 2 days old, and her health was good, and the given name, despite, can you see here, the parent wished for that girl to be named Carolina.
Yeah.
Carolina, can you see here?
Yeah, yeah.
That girl was then named Maria Litto.
Maria.
So they invented the name. And this Maria Litto, this girl, then was given to the wet nurse Giuseppa Miso, figlia di Andrea Miso. And anyway, what was recorded in these books was also the wet nurse who was then going to breastfeed this little girl, this foundling. And where was she living? In Mandanice, which is in Provincia di Messina. So just for you to see other signals I could find in the books for Messina. Can you see? There was this. It's like kind of, there was a cross.
And also, Dr. Lucy, lucky some of them could write.
Oh,
yes.
There were other people writing for them. Sometimes they were the priests.
Most of them would have been illiterate. They wouldn't have been able to
write.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we had midwives or priests writing for this girl. Look, here I found this message left with the baby, and then also some hair.
Yeah.
So the signal of this baby was that he was found with his hair, because it was a boy. So the hair of this boy was cut. So that was the signal in that case, as well as the kind of clothes he was wearing. So he was given then to Concetta de Mais. As you can see, there were also the names of the foster parents. And here, this is the patron saint of Messina. As I told you, symbols could be holy images cut in half. Then one day, the parents could come back, showing the other half and matching as a proof of identity. But in this case, we have that this baby died. In for Syphilis.
This baby was 5 months old.
Yes.
Yes, 5 months old. 5 months old. And died of an illness which was very spread at that time. It was a syphilis. Do you know what's that?
No.
It's a kind of illness which was very, very spread at that time. And it was an illness which was caused by sexual relationships.
So it's syphilis.
Yes, syphilis.
There we go.
So the babies.
Not that I know anything about syphilis, but it's what it sounds.
Yeah. No, but that was the one. Yeah. So kids, for example, who were born from sick parents, then could have this illness and then could die.
That's another example of different medical conditions between nobility and the people that are just poor, because I'm sure the people with nobility would have had some care and a care attendance to them. Now, I've never heard of that's why I didn't know whether it was syphilis or not. I've actually never heard of a child being, passing away in death due to syphilis, because syphilis is usually an STI based on adults, people that are sexually active than having more than one partner and what have you. And I wasn't aware that you could actually transfer that over to a child. So that's,
and it was very, very spread also by breastfeeding children. If you were sick,
really?
Yes.
It's contagious.
In the documents I could find,
wow.
They were paying attention to give these children to people who were not sick of syphilis, because it was very, very popular and amongst the poor people. So even breastfeeding as a person with syphilis, a child, you could then transmit this to children. Yeah.
The interesting thing is, just to give you some contents, is that I did a lot of research on Henry VIII when I was younger, because I was fascinated by this man who changed, the Catholic religion in England to the Church of England, and why he did that. And he died of, they say he died of gout, but actually Henry VIII died of syphilis.
Oh, yeah. For example, here there is another example. This baby, I'll show you. This baby was, here, there are two cases where the children were then came back with the parents. As you can see here, there was the recording of everything related to the child. The signal was this image, but then, so if the child was found on the 4th of October, we can see that 8 days after, il nominato Paolo Longo, vedovo di Giovanna. So the dad of this child came back saying that he was a fisherman and went to Brefotrofio back, declaring that he abandoned his child because his wife died for cholera.
Yeah.
And
cholera,
was obliged to abandon to the will his son Antonino, that in the Brefotrofio then was called Giorgio. So he asked his child back in this case.
Can I just go back? Sorry, Lucia, can I just go back? I've just looked at syphilis and it actually is correct. And I didn't know this, but a mother to baby by pregnancy or labor or nursing can pass on syphilis. And I wasn't even aware of that, because it's not really a modern day, STI, but I wasn't aware of that. So that's really interesting to know that.
Yeah, many kids then could die because of this. Cholera at the time, syphilis. Look, this is another case. This is the image of Madonna del Tindari dell'Ottocento. Look, Carmela, you know Madonna del Tindari. This is something rare to see. The image of Madonna del Tindari of the end of the 19th century, which I could find as a signal.
A lot of that baby was born around that vicinity.
Yeah, it could be possible. And he was left with this signal, and as you can see here, we have then recorded that il nominato Giovanni Sarao. So his dad, no, it was a boy, A boy was left on the 15th of October 1887 to the will of Messina, found with some kind of clothing and this image. But then, as you can see, he's dead. Giovanni Sarao, domiciliato in Castania, it's near Messina, di professione bracciante, so he was a farmer. Si presentò il 24, so not so too much time after, dichiarando di aver passato alla ruota. So the father of this child abandoned the baby, dichiarando that he left this child per amori illegittimi. Oh, yeah. It means because this boy was born out of wedlock.
Yeah.
Volendolo riconoscere, now then he wanted to recognize as a proper child. He came back and showed a biglietto which listed the clothes where, you know, the baby was found with certain clothes, and so the father said, I left this child.
So look at the age. That was 1887 when the baby was left, and he came on 1895. So the baby would have been about 8 years old.
Yeah, very good. Well, yes, that's right. So he was.
It would have picked him up at 8 years old.
Yeah. Yes, and in the meantime, he was given to a foster family. And the wet nurse was Carmela, anyway, living in Mandanici. And the parents came back after.
Going back to the fishermen, cholera is a bacterial pandemic that was started in India that then spread throughout the world by bacteria growing in water. So obviously the fisherman and his wife were out there catching fish, and she died because of the bacteria she would have drank through the fresh water during that particular time.
Cholera was, you know, we are living coronavirus. Cholera was very spread at that time as well.
Yeah. It was a pandemic, yeah.
Pandemic. So here, what happened to these kids? They were given a reference number, but also there was a kind of institutional identification, which was called impiombatura. So the baby received a necklace fixed in such a manner that it could be not removed, and it was made of thick silk cord, and then the ends were joined with a lead medal, as you can see here. And one side of the medal had the symbol of the council or the Brepotrofio, the foundling hospital. On the other side, the identification number of the child. And this was a procedure to avoid fraud from the wet nurses. So, because these women from the countryside were the ones breastfeeding these children who were available, and actually it was a kind of social phenomenon because these women could earn money by doing this.
Yeah.
But sometimes what happened, there were frauds, because if the child, for example, from the Brepotrofio, who was in care of this wet nurse, died, in order to continue to receive money, these women can replace that child with their children. Oh. Does it make sense? So that was the reason why there was this kind of identification, to avoid this kind of frauds by the women from the countryside who were the wet nurses, having these foundlings in foster care, because it was very, very popular.
So you have another layer where you've got people of nobility having children with people of poor social economic status. You've got families where they've got poor social economic status, they're not able to provide for their family. Then you've got another area which is somebody who is going to utilize the welfare system to supplement their income by creating a child to breastfeed their own child, but really fraudulently creating a welfare system so they can support themselves. That's something even beyond our world.
Yeah, it is completely beyond. And the reason why, you know, the people of the Brefotropio didn't give the preferred names to these children is to avoid also that parents left their children to have them back for foster care in order to earn money. So the fact that they identify these people with other names is to avoid also this kind of frauds. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but it was.
It's unthinkable, but I understand it. It's unthinkable.
Because of the poverty, desperation. So here you have the real medal, which was given to the children of the Brefotropio of Messina. I could found this in a very old market by chance.
Oh wow!
So this was the medal who actually, which actually was given to someone in 1929 with the reference number. So as you can see, on a side there is the Brefotropio Provinciale di Messina, on the other side the year and the number, the reference number for that person.
So each child was given one of those medallions?
Yeah. You know, it was the institutional identification.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone had these, and I could find a couple of them in old markets in Messina. So this is an example. So here, the last names were invented, but what happened was that at the very beginning, the earliest records for the foundlings of Messina, of Sicily, anyway, also in the rest of Italy, were related to the status of foundling. So it was very popular that until 1827, we could have last names for these kids, such as Proietti. Proietti was meaning cast off and was very popular in Sicily. Then we have Trovato, Trovatello as well as a very popular last name for these foundlings. And in Messina was very popular anyway also. Abbandonata, abandoned. Esposto, Esposito. This was very popular, huge as a last name given to.
There's a lot of Americans. There's a lot of Americans with the Espositos.
You know where they come from?
Spanish. It's also Spanish.
Campania.
But it's also a Spanish, a Spanish surname and a first name.
It's Esposito was given in Campania, in Naples. There was a Brefotropio, Santa Maria dell'Annunziata, and all the babies abandoned there were given Esposito until a certain point. Then I will tell you what happened. Okay. Innocenti comes from, so abandoned baby in Firenze. Dignoti was very popular as well. Incogniti, Colombo was very popular and huge in Milan, because the dove was the symbol of the Brefotropio of Milano.
Okay.
Della Scala was the foundling last name for Siena, foundlings from Siena. But what happened was that because this was so stigmatizing these children, like Carmela, you said, it was a stigma for life. Yeah. And if you had a last name reminding this kind of status was even bad for these poor kids. So the law established that the foundlings had to have an invented last names. So what happened for Sicily is that, for example, as you can see here in the records of the children, I could find that they were given last name like Corbino, blind, Guasto, Milingiana. Milingiana is eggplant in Sicilian. Vinagra, bitter wine, Di Dio, D'Angelo, Del Popolo, Di Giugno. These are just examples of invented last name. Some of them were even bad sometimes, according to the health state of the child. Like I could find also as a last name morente, like dying, because that baby was in a bad condition.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, you can see that there was this kind of identification, and then the wet nurses, according to the law, had to be healthy, honest women, having good milk, di buon latte, with good milk. They had to be married, maritate. So, for example, they had to be able to breastfeed. So they have, sometimes they had dead children, so had still milk. Yeah. And anyway, these women came from the countryside. They were farmers.
Can we stop here and go, and we'll go to the next one there. Wow. Lina, do you want to say something?
I think these stories are important stories to be told, and I can't think, whilst you're telling us these stories, I'm thinking of the people that have gone before us and the people that were ostracized, the mothers that gave up their children, the mothers that gave birth to their own child, but they had to provide milk and to survive to another child. I think about the poverty. I think about the mother giving up the child to create a better life for themselves. And I just can't think of what they're thinking in their mind and how desperate they must be. And I don't know, Lucia, you're the voice of these people. I can't say anything more about thank you for sharing your story. And they thank you for sharing them. And we're not talking about a small handful of people. We're talking about thousands and thousands, and we're only focusing on Sicily. But there's so many layers to the hurt, and so many layers to the secrets, and the stress and the anxiety and the mental health, the poverty. I just can't think of that world because I'm not used to that world, but these are stories that need to be told. So I know we're running out of time, but I want to say something about my grandfather later. Anyway.
We'll go to the next one. All right. Thank you, Dr. Lucy. Thank you for
Grazie,
that.
Bella.
Listen to our next episode, guys. We're so grateful that you could come on board and listen to this, and we could share this journey and the stories of the past with you. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.